She was dismissed like a nuisance with one cold sentence from the CFO. No one noticed the folder in her hand until Monday came and the boardroom door locked from her side. The email came at 6:07 p.m. on a Thursday. Subject line, "Final decision regarding your role." No greeting, no signature, just a single line from the CFO. "You're no longer part of this company." The words sat there, unblinking on the screen like a final verdict with no trial. I blinked. Once, twice. Then I stood up, closed my laptop, and exhaled. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even forward the message to my attorney. Instead, I picked up a thick manila folder from the bottom drawer of my locked cabinet, untouched for 18 months, and placed it gently in my tote. The office was unusually quiet that evening. Finance had wrapped up their Q3 scramble, and the board wasn't due to meet until Monday. Still, I felt them watching from behind their smoked glass walls and artificial plants, the interns whispering near the kitchen, the VP avoiding eye contact by the elevators. I could almost hear it in their minds. She must have messed up. No one crosses the CFO? She was always too quiet, too composed. Funny how people mistake silence for weakness. By Friday morning, I was locked out of the network. Badge deactivated. Company phone remotely wiped. My name? Already gone from the firm's internal directory. By lunchtime, a new hire was sitting at my desk. Someone had replaced the framed photo of my mother with a motivational quote about synergy. "Guess they're cleaning house," one of the engineers murmured near the vending machine, not realizing I was standing behind him. I smiled politely. "Guess they are." He looked startled. I kept walking. That afternoon, a courier tried to deliver a termination packet to my home. My building concierge refused the drop-off. I had already spoken to my lawyer. More importantly, I had already made a call. They didn't know. Not yet. But they would. Because the manila folder in my bag didn't hold a resume or an appeal. It held something they never thought to look for. Ownership. And Monday was coming. They erased her name from the company's system, without realizing it was carved into the foundation. The board meeting was set for 9:00 a.m. sharp, Monday. I arrived at 8:42. They didn't expect me to show up. In fact, they didn't expect me to exist in that room ever again, which made the moment I walked in, document folder in hand, all the more delightful. "Ma'am, this meeting is for board-level executives only," said the assistant outside the glass-walled conference room, her voice tight. "I know," I replied. "I brought the documents they requested." She frowned but didn't move. I could see the CFO pacing inside the room, gesturing dramatically while the CEO stared into his coffee. The assistant hesitated, then cracked the door open and whispered something to the CFO. His face turned sour, his jaw tight. He opened the door, fake smile in place, and hissed, "I told you Friday, you're out. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be." I didn't blink. Instead, I opened the folder and held out the front page. His smile dropped. For a moment, the room went completely still. The page was a certificate of equity transfer, dated, notarized, verified, stamped with legal seals and bearing the signature of the original founder, his father. Next was a series of board memos from years ago. Then, a binding clause from the LLC's original operating agreement. And at the bottom of the stack, the schedule of ownership. My name, 73%, silent partner, majority stakeholder, undisclosed, by design. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice suddenly lower. I leaned slightly forward. "From the man who started this firm, the man you call Dad. He gave it to me before he stepped down." The CFO looked like he'd been punched through the ribs. Behind him, I saw two board members turn toward each other, whispering. The head of legal, Melissa, was already flipping through the copies I'd provided. She didn't ask questions, just kept reading. Her pen tapped faster with every page. The CEO cleared his throat. "Let's everyone sit down." I didn't sit. Not yet. "I have no interest in running daily operations," I began. But when I was removed on Thursday, without cause, without vote, without disclosure, you forced my hand. I slid a second set of documents across the table. A notice of breach, a call for emergency audit, and a formal request to invoke the founder's clause. The silence was beautiful. Even the assistant outside had stopped typing. "You were never meant to be involved," the CFO finally muttered. I tilted my head. And yet, here I am. They wanted her out by Friday. By Monday, she was the only one they couldn't fire. Ever been underestimated in your own story? Drop a comment if you've ever been dismissed too soon and stayed quiet just long enough to flip the ending. The room didn't exhale for a full 30 seconds. Melissa, the head of legal, finally broke the silence, not with words, but with a nod. She had confirmed everything. Dates, signatures, ownership breakdown. There was no loophole to crawl through, no clause to twist. The CFO collapsed into the chair beside him, his eyes darting between faces like a man watching dominoes fall. Except he was the last tile. I finally took my seat at the boardroom table. Before we proceed, the CEO said carefully, I think we should address the new information. New information. That's what they called it. Not fact, not reality, not legal structure. Just inconvenient news that arrived in a tote bag. I waited. Let them stew in their curated discomfort. The room smelled like citrus cleaner and fragile egos. I assume you'll want to clarify your position moving forward, he added. I will, I said. But first, I'd like to hear how the CFO justified my removal. It wasn't a question, and it wasn't optional. The CFO's voice cracked on the first word. There was concern about loyalty, about performance metrics. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He knew those metrics were doctored. He knew exactly what he'd buried before sending that email. I let the pause stretch. Every board member looked uncomfortable now, not because they felt guilt, but because they feared implication. I'd like the minutes to reflect, I said, that I was removed without a vote, without cause, and in violation of multiple internal policies. Melissa nodded. It's on record. Then I leaned back, took out a single document from my bag and slid it toward the CEO. A proposed motion, simple, clean, final, to remove the CFO, effective immediately. He read it, then looked at me, then at the ownership schedule, then back at me. Do we even need a vote? One of the board members whispered. Melissa cleared her throat. Technically, with her majority, no. It's already binding. The CFO stood suddenly. You're making a mistake. I built this place. No, I said softly. You built a version of it. The foundation came long before you, and it remembers my name. He stormed out of the room, the door slamming behind him, but no one moved to stop him. By the end of the meeting, the motion had passed, and I didn't raise my voice once. The aftermath wasn't loud. No fireworks, no public statements, no urgent company-wide memos, just silence, cold and clinical, the kind that seeps into inboxes and creeps down hallways like fog no one wants to name. By Wednesday, the CFO's office was emptied out, the nameplate gone, his photo at the last gala removed from the internal site. A polite, vague message from HR cited a strategic leadership change, but everyone knew. They just didn't know how. The whispers started in finance first. Did you hear what really happened? I heard she's been with the firm since before the acquisition. No, I think she owns part of the parent company. Speculation bloomed like weeds in fluorescent light, but I didn't answer any questions. I returned to the office on Thursday, dressed as I always had. No drama, no entourage, just a woman in quiet control. A junior analyst passed me in the elevator, eyes wide. Is it true? She blurted, then immediately regretted it. I smiled gently. Some things don't need to be said. They just need to be done. Her mouth opened, then closed. She nodded. By Friday, the CEO requested a one-on-one. We met in a corner room with a view of the city I helped build, though no one had known it until now. He didn't posture or perform. He just spoke, candid and clear. We need to talk about your future here. I raised an eyebrow. Is there one? That depends on what you want. Power is a strange thing, not just in owning it, but in deciding how to use it. I could have restructured everything, pulled every lever, rewritten every contract. But that was never the plan. The plan was respect, accountability, and the unshakable reminder that silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. I left that meeting with no new title, no public victory lap, just the truth. They now knew who built the bones of this company, and they'd think twice before erasing the wrong name again. Monday returned like a slow-moving storm. The office looked the same. Polished floors, stale coffee, hollow chatter near the elevators. But something in the air had shifted. Not fear, not reverence, awareness. I wasn't just back. I was present now in a way they couldn't ignore, couldn't dismiss, couldn't delete from the directory. That week, I noticed something odd. The same department heads who had once CC'd me as a courtesy now waited before sending reports, asking if I wanted them presented differently. The head of HR, who had never once met my eyes in 6 years, knocked on my door with a revised policy draft. She spoke in softer tones. I didn't ask her to. I didn't need to. But power, once revealed, is rarely allowed to rest. By Thursday, 2 senior VPs had requested meetings. One just wanted to touch base. The other brought a thinly veiled offer to redistribute responsibilities, which amusingly included transferring my own legacy projects to himself. I listened, smiled, declined, and added a new clause to the next board agenda. Ownership review of all ongoing IP, just a footnote. But footnotes can be surgical. Melissa, the head of legal, passed me in the hall later that day and murmured, "That was a precise touch." I smiled. I only trim what's overgrown. Still, not everyone adjusted. There were those who couldn't let go of the version of me they thought they controlled. People who felt entitled to power they hadn't earned. Like the former CFO's protege who now strutted through the office as if nothing had happened. He cornered me by the espresso machine on Friday. "You really think you can run this place by showing up once a quarter and signing papers?" I didn't reply. I let him stand there in his suit, soaked in defensiveness. Then I picked up my coffee, met his eyes, and said, "No, I don't need to run it. I just need to own it." He didn't speak again. Not that day. Not the next. Sometimes silence is the last word. The audit results came in quietly. Too quietly. Melissa handed me the envelope in a sealed folder, her expression unreadable. "No major surprises," she said, but her tone said otherwise. I waited until I was alone in my office, the one they hadn't reassigned, only rekeyed, and opened the folder. 3 pages in, I found it. A discrepancy. Small on paper. Massive in implication. There had been a fund. Allocated under a now terminated discretionary budget. Coded vaguely as executive development, but traced back, it fed into shell contracts, non-existent consultants, duplicate invoices, backdated approvals, sloppy, and unmistakably tied to the CFO. But he wasn't alone. A signature caught my eye on the 5th page, one of the board members. So that's why he had been silent during the meeting. So careful, so polite. They hadn't just tried to erase me, they had been laundering the silence of others. I closed the folder and sat still for a long time. This wasn't just about power anymore. This was about integrity. The firm I had helped build, quietly, patiently, had rot in its roots. And now I had the map to every diseased branch. I didn't go to war. I scheduled a compliance review, invited a third-party forensic firm, and signed the orders without raising an eyebrow. Melissa said nothing when she saw the names on the list. Just nodded. The whispers returned. But they were different now. Not, "Is she coming back?" But, "Did you hear who's under review?" "She's cleaning house." No leaks, not even to legal. Control isn't about volume, it's about precision. And with every silent move, I was peeling the company back to the bone, to the part that remembered who it belonged to. By the 2nd week of the audit, the energy inside the building had shifted again, this time from curiosity to calculation. Department heads kept their doors closed more often. Slack threads were quieter. Even the break room chatter dimmed, like everyone was holding their breath between sips of bad coffee. One by one, the names surfaced. The untouchables. The lifers who had floated for years on charm, connections, and the illusion of competence. Now they were flagged by data, and data doesn't care who you play golf with. Melissa dropped by my office unannounced. "You're about to make enemies," she said flatly, setting down a fresh set of findings. "Only the kind who thought I wouldn't look," I answered. She didn't smile, but her eyes did. That week, the firm's head of operations resigned for personal reasons. 3 vendor contracts were paused. 1 offshore account was closed overnight. No memos, no press releases, just ripples, slowly widening across the firm's polished surface. The CEO requested a follow-up. "We need to manage perception," he said. "Morale, investor confidence." I nodded. "Then let them see something worth believing in." He hesitated. You know, we could spin this quietly. Internal realignments, new leadership language. I shook my head. We don't spin integrity, we demonstrate it. The next day, I visited the teams no one ever sees. Data entry, logistics, customer accounts. I didn't give speeches. I asked questions. I listened. And I saw something more dangerous than corruption: fatigue. People so used to being ignored, they'd stopped imagining change. That was the final straw. The firm didn't just need cleansing, it needed rewiring. So I drafted something new, a policy shift, a structural realignment, ownership programs for legacy staff, transparency chains embedded into project pipelines, real reform, not performative. Melissa reviewed it, eyebrows lifting halfway through. You really want to sign this? No, I said. I want to build with it. The board would vote next week, but I already knew the result because they didn't own the firm, not like I did. And now they knew it too. The board meeting that Monday felt different, not colder, quieter. No posturing, no backroom smiles, no clinks of glass or murmured jokes. Everyone had read the proposal. Everyone knew the implications. It wasn't just a shift in policy, it was a shift in philosophy, from gated leadership to shared equity, from smoke-filled decisions to transparent frameworks. Some were nervous, some were thrilled, and a few, the ones who'd grown fat on obscurity, looked like ghosts in tailored suits. I opened the meeting with no fanfare, just a copy of the new framework placed in front of each member. Melissa projected the key changes, bullet points, clean, clinical, every word sharper than any blade. Are we voting on this today? One of the directors asked, eyes narrowed. You're welcome to vote, I replied, but the changes that fall under ownership rights are already in motion. He shifted uncomfortably. And the rest? I smiled. I'd prefer we move together, but I'm prepared to move either way. There it was. The split second where fear meets respect, where they realize you don't need their approval, you're offering them dignity. The vote was unanimous, not out of loyalty, out of logic, survival, recognition. Later that afternoon, as the announcement went live, something unexpected happened. People clapped. Not in the boardroom, in the building, in Slack channels, in private DMs, in conference huddles where they thought no one was listening. A quiet, reverberating ripple of something long missing: belief. That evening, I stayed late, not out of duty, out of reverence for what this place had been, for what it had survived, and for what it would finally become. I walked the halls in silence, stopped by the glass wall that overlooked the city, and remembered the day I was told, "You're no longer part of this company." I whispered into the empty room. No, I am the company. It started with a letter, a handwritten note, slid under my office door, folded once with no name on the outside. Inside, "Thank you. I stayed because of this place. Now I want to build it." No signature, no title, just that. I kept it. Over the next few weeks, the transformation wasn't loud, but it was felt. Departments started collaborating laterally, without being told. Budget requests now included ethical review lines. Exit interviews turned into retention dialogues. And people, the quiet ones, the overlooked ones, began stepping forward, not to take credit, but to offer value. One day in the elevator, the same junior analyst who had once stumbled through a question blurted out, "You made it feel like ours again." I looked at her, genuinely startled, because I hadn't tried to inspire. I had just corrected course. But that's the thing about integrity. It scales. The CEO approached me in the hallway one afternoon. He didn't speak in bullet points or stakeholder terms. He said, "I misread you." I answered, "A lot of people did." He nodded. But now, no one will again. We walked together for a few minutes. Then I stopped. "There's one thing left," I said. He raised an eyebrow. I handed him a sealed envelope. Inside, my formal resignation from the day-to-day operations, effective immediately. "You're leaving?" he asked. "No," I smiled. "I'm stepping back. Ownership remains, influence remains, but now it's your turn to lead without shadows." He opened his mouth, closed it, then simply nodded. I walked out of the building, not as a martyr, not as a victor, but as someone who had written herself back into the architecture of something she once loved, not because they asked it, but because she could. No headlines, no interviews, no vengeance, just one firm, still standing. and the woman who quietly rebuilt it from inside the storm. Spring came early that year, or maybe I just noticed it more, now that the wait was gone. Mornings didn't start with calendar alerts or legal summaries. They began with coffee I made slowly, music that played too loud, and the quiet hum of a world I had almost forgotten to live in. But the calls didn't stop. Not from investors, not from board members, not from the young woman who now sat at what used to be my desk, asking for guidance, not permission. And I gave it, but only when asked. One afternoon, I got a package, no return address. Inside, a framed version of that equity certificate, the original. A post-it was stuck to the glass. She never needed a title to run this place, just a spine. I laughed, then cried, then placed it on the wall near my bookshelves, between a photo of my mother and a rusting paperweight from my first job. People assume stories like this end with fireworks. A parade, a full-page feature in some glossy magazine. But that's not how quiet revolutions end. They end when the system bends, not breaks, when power shifts without screaming, when the foundation holds because someone remembered to check for cracks. At lunch one day, I met Melissa for coffee. She looked freer, too. "You really let it go," she said. "I didn't let it go," I corrected. I handed it forward. She raised her cup in a silent toast. I raised mine back. That evening, I sat on my balcony and watched the lights flicker across the skyline. One of them belonged to the firm. It always would. And somewhere, in that building, someone else was probably whispering, "How did we miss that she owns the firm?" They didn't. Not anymore.